Hi, my name is Ally Calandro. I'm a senior at Frisco High School, and I'm going to attend UT Austin in the fall. This is my second year in ISM, and I'm studying educational entrepreneurship. So the reason that I'm studying educational entrepreneurship, it's kind of a field that I somewhat made up. It exists, but it's not very common. So I was tested and identified as GT in Frisco ISD from kindergarten through 8th grade. The work was challenging, but I loved it. We had so much fun. There were a lot of us that were in the classes all the way from K through 8, and we really became a family in that time, and the work was so difficult and new and unlike anything I'd ever done before, but I loved it and enjoyed it. We had a great time. But then we got to high school, and the program dropped off considerably. There's no gifted education program in high school that's specifically gifted education. There's pre-AP and AP classes, but as I learned and I saw in my classmates, it's not the same kind of work. It's very routine and repetitive, and the GT work was not like that at all. It was very innovative and creative and exciting, and I was really enjoying it. So school became kind of an obstacle to what I wanted to learn about. I had all this excitement about school in high school and what I was going to learn and all the cool things I was going to learn how to do, and then school just kind of became an obstacle to that. I had other things I wanted to study, other things I wanted to learn about, and school wasn't really doing that for me. And for my friends that were in GT from K through 8 with me, they kind of dropped off. So if you don't have the same motivation and support from your family and from your teachers and from your friends, the AP work quickly becomes monotonous and it wasn't exciting anymore. And so then they started taking regular classes to avoid just extra homework, which is pretty much what it turned out to be. And I thought this was really sad because they were super smart and bright and we had a great time, but at the end of the day, the system kind of failed them, and it wasn't supporting their needs and their wants for their own education. So going into that, I went through 9th and 10th grade at Frisco High School, and then I learned about ISM, and I decided that this sounds like a cool idea. You know, a creative project. It's not technical. You don't have to be identified gifted and talented to be an ISM, but a lot of people are. And so I was like, perfect. This is going to be great. I can learn about gifted education, kind of what the deal is and why we don't have any programs and how we can maybe change that. So I had two mentors. My first mentor was Dr. Todd Kettler. He's a professor at the University of North Texas of educational psychology, and we had actually planned for my final product to be a phenomenological study of the math and science experiences of high school gifted students. But we had done all the paperwork and everything, and then the last little bit that we needed was just approval from Frisco ISD to do the study, and they said that we could not do it. So this turned out to be a blessing in disguise because my new product was even better than anything I had imagined before. But for my new product, I brought on Miss Kelly Starnes, who was my GT teacher in elementary school, and then was a great support to me in fleshing out this new idea that I had for my product. So this is my product. It's a classroom model. It fits in the current system. I did, as a sample, this is for pre-cal because that's the math class that I was in. And it's just a little bit more individualized, a little bit more personalized, and they have some more freedom as to what they're learning and how and when. But it still fits within the current system of so-and-so class periods a day with a teacher and students, and the teacher lectures, and then you take notes, and then you do homework and everything. It fits a very straight-cut classroom. But then I learned through my interviews and through my research that GT is not really a class. Like, you can't solve the problem with just throwing those kids in a classroom in a GT math class, and that will solve the problem. That'll make them excited about school. So I got really frustrated with my product, and everything that you see is kind of theoretical. I didn't really work in the like the realistic aspects of it. I kind of just focused on the big ideas, and then towards the end I started thinking, I don't know if this is a good idea. GT is not really for a class, you know, it really has to be more like a whole system, and they need more than just this one class, and so I was like, I don't know what to do. So then, after being very frustrated, I went for the summer and thought about it, and I decided that I kind of wanted to do my own thing. So that's when I was in ISM 2. I'm studying educational entrepreneurship, which is the study of like independent schools, so like public, private, charter, magnet schools, there's all kinds of things. So I just wanted to see what the other solutions were, especially for gifted students in high school. So my interviews were with Miss Stephanie Scott of the Louisville STEM Academy, Dr. Chris Harmon of the Legacy Christian Academy, Miss Cheryl Holton, and Miss Melissa Finley from St. Philip's Academy, Ms. Yasmin Bhatia and Mr. Rich Harrison from Uplift Education, Ms. Jody Capehart from the Grace Academy of North Texas, and Mr. John Ashton from the Hockaday School of Dallas. And all these schools are very different from one another. Some of them are private, some of them are public schools, some of them are charters. I interviewed at a lot of different places, but almost all the people that I interviewed were the heads of schools or the principals or something equivalent to that. So the biggest thing that I learned from all of my interviews was the size of the school really makes a difference in what the climate of the school is like. Some of the schools that I interviewed at were very small, and I didn't care for that too much because I feel like they all knew each other, they were all in each other's business all the time, and it's hard, especially within public schools, if it's very small, to have diverse programming because you don't get as much funding for fewer students. And so I wanted to kind of have a little bit of a bigger school, and then Frisco High School, the one that we're in now, is a little bit too large for my taste. It's hard to have individualization when there's just so many students. There's just so many. But another thing is that there's something for everybody. These are all high schools except for St. Philip's Academy is elementary only, K through 3. And there's just something for everyone. Anything that you're looking for, these schools are all very different, and there were all different kinds of people that fit in there. They all found a place at their school, which was really exciting for me to see, and just fun that the kids there were so excited, especially at the smaller schools. They just all knew each other, and it was very family oriented, much like the experience that I had in GT from K through 8. So after my interviews, I chose Mrs. Holton to be my mentor from St. Philip's Academy. It's K through 3, and I'm looking at high school, but Ms. Holton has really helped start St. Philip's Academy. It's brand new, and she does all kinds of things within the school. It's very small, so she has a lot of different responsibilities within the school. And also she's an incredibly helpful resource with advice and ideas, and she supported everything that I thought about GT, and we just got along really well. So I was excited to choose her as my mentor. So also within my research, I discovered that IQ scoring is a tricky subject. So usually you're identified as special needs or having special needs or needing special education with an IQ of 70 or below, which is the blue on the left, and then you're considered gifted with about 130 IQ or over, and that's the blue on the right. So these are the same variation from the norm. So like if you were identified as special needs, you would be receiving in public education all kinds of assistance and help and pulling out from your classes and everything. But if you're identified with an IQ of 130 or over and you're identified as GT, you're kind of thrown in there with the rest of the kids, which is hard because with gifted education, especially, a big component is soft curriculum, which is learning how to interact with others and emotions and everything. They're really good at the analytical aspect of learning, but the soft curriculum is a little bit more difficult to get with such a high IQ. And so one of the things that I discovered with my mentorship with Mrs. Holton is that St. Philip's is a private school, so they have a lot of options as far as taking care of their gifted students and making sure that they're getting the education they need, just because it's so much smaller, and they charge tuition, so they have a lot more resources. But there's a girl that she was telling me about in her classes, and I think 3rd grade, and she's super talented. She's very bright and most likely gifted and talented, and she's super creative and comes up with these stories and environments and all kinds. She's just very creative, but she is so young that her handwriting, she can't keep up. She comes up with these stories and she can dream them in her head, but then she can't write them down because her little hands can't move fast enough. And then on top of that, she doesn't have the maturity to understand, take a deep breath, and have the patience to write it out and think it all out. She's too young for that as well. So that she gets super frustrated and rips up the pages and can't do anything. And it's great that she goes to St. Philip's because they have dictation softwares for her. They can work with her on her patience and everything. But if she was going to a public elementary school, she would most likely not receive any special attention for her needs, even though she is the same distance from the norm as a special needs student. And she needs the same care and education as a special needs student, but she would not be getting that at public high school, or public elementary, middle high school. So the other thing within research is kind of narrowing down what the different types of schools are. So there's public high schools, which is like Frisco High School, a huge normal public high school. They receive funding from the state. You go to the school based on your geographic boundaries and everything, and you'd follow the state standardized testing, so the STAR, and then the TEKS are what what the curriculum has to follow, what the state of Texas says. This is what an algebra class looks like. This is what a geometry class looks like. Private schools don't have to follow the state. They're outside of the state. They don't have any geographical boundaries that you would have to follow. And they charge tuition, so they don't have to get funding from the state, which means that they don't have to follow the TEKS or the STAR. They don't have to take the STAR test. But private schools are a wonderful resource for anyone who can afford it. But there's a lot of students, especially gifted students, that could definitely benefit from that individualized learning, but can't afford to attend a private school or don't have the desire to attend a private school. So within public schools, there's a lot of smaller options with charter and magnet schools. So they're the same. They receive funding from the state. They take the standardized testing. They follow the TEKS and everything. But there's looser geographic boundaries, and they have a lot more leeway as far as innovation is concerned. They don't necessarily have to follow all the rules of the public high schools, and they're often a lot smaller. And they're really created for the purpose of innovation and kind of competing with the public high schools. The public high school doesn't really have to compete like a private or a charter or magnet school would, in that they're not competing for students to go to their school. They don't have to advertise their school because most likely, most of the students are going to attend the public high school. They don't have to come up with all these innovative programs and reasons to get people to go there, because most people will just by default. So with all of this information and research, I discovered a couple of things that were key in what I wanted to create in my school. So I wanted to be high school, grades 9 through 12. I think we have a fairly adequate GT program from K through 8, but then 9th through 12th is something that I really feel like needs some attention. Small and medium size, around 450 students total for grades 9 through 12. That averages about 110 students per grade. And from all the schools that I interviewed at, that was an ideal where they mostly knew each other and they had lots of friends and it was a community, but they still had room to meet new people and have diverse programming and everything. I also wanted to be able to achieve Texas state qualifications to attend college. They're still going to follow the TEKS and the STAR, and they'll still be able to attend the University of Texas in the fall. No extra cost, publicly funded. I didn't want to charge tuition. I didn't want to have that exclusivity along with the school. Open enrollment, same thing. No qualifications. So for a charter school, you can't ask for test scores or anything like that, or athletic ability. It's just whoever signs up can go to the school. Independently managed, I wanted it to be separate from the regular public high school. I didn't want to try and work inside the public high school. That is a lot of red tape. Exploration of interest through independent study, I wanted that to be a big thing. For the students to be able to look into whatever they found interesting and explore those interests. That's what high school is really for, I think, is a time to figure out kind of what you want to do, what you like, what you don't like. And so I wanted them to be able to explore any interests they have through independent study. Encourage curiosity, innovation, and self-motivation. Those are 3 key things that I think are important, especially for gifted students. Those are going to be the ones that are future leaders and future creators and inventors and everything. And I think that it's important that we encourage that from the beginning. And maintain traditional classrooms and core subjects. There's all kinds of schools out there where they do all kinds of crazy things, but I think that the normal classroom works fairly well with math, as far as like core subjects go, with math and science and history and English. It's a very effective way to get instruction across. So then, taking all these things, I kind of came up with my own schedule and format for this for the school. Like an average class a day would be 4 class periods in the morning of the core classes, and then the whole afternoon is devoted to independent study. But I'll explain later what they are doing in the afternoons during their independent study. They don't just get to research whatever they want, whenever they want. And so this was a quote that I found that I really feel like kind of personifies what is important about learning, especially in high school. And what I found was the difference between AP classes and GT classes. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. I wanted to make sure that my students are learning about the beauty of education and that they'll want to continue furthering their education for the rest of their life. That this wasn't just like a step that they, an assignment they had to complete, a class they had to pass, but that this was the beginning of something that they really loved and really cared about. And that it can apply to any sort of endeavor that they would have. So for my original work, this is kind of the boring part, but it was necessary for me to develop my product. So I did the requirements and review of application for opening a charter school in Texas. The charter application is called the Generation 20 Open Enrollment Charter Application in Texas. And so I went through and kind of analyzed all the things that you would need to have if you were looking to establish a charter school in Texas. These are the things that you would have to do before you could apply, and all the kinds of things that you would have to know, like there's a statement of impact form, admissions and enrollment policies, a budget, description of your facility, staffing charts, human resources forms, job descriptions, qualifications, all kinds of things. Everything that you would actually have to have if you were going to start a charter school. And this was something different from last year, was that this year I really wanted to work realistically. Like, could this really happen? Could I really do this? Is this something that makes sense and could actually work in the current system, rather than just working in theory and this would maybe be a great idea if so-and-so, if all these things happened. So after that, I split my original work, I split all those different things into different components. So I have component A, which is the statement of impact form, grade, promotion and retention, and graduation requirements. Component B, independent course summaries. Component C, admissions and enrollment policy. E, organizational chart of responsibility and supplemental human resources forms. F, principal, job description and qualifications. G, description of facility. And H, yearly expenses and income. And then I spread these out to where it was about a week for each one, but I left it kind of flexible because I really didn't know what I was getting into. So I just kind of let myself, I mapped it out, but I didn't stick to it too tightly. So component A is the statement of impact form, grade, promotion and retention, and then graduation requirements. So the statement of impact form is what you would send to potentially affected school districts, letting them know that you're thinking about opening a charter school and this is, the effects that it could have on their school. So I said that the likely loss will be pre-AP and AP students and students identified as gifted and talented, although they don't have to be. These are most likely the students that would like to attend my charter school. And they're within a 15 to 20 mile radius. That's pretty average. The grade, promotion, and retention requirements. I have the State of Texas Student Success Initiative, which is their idea of what you have to do. And since we're receiving funding from the state, then you have to follow all those rules with the TEKS and everything. Core credit classes 70% or higher, and then they have to perform on 10 inquiries and 2 individual explorations or 1 independent study and mentorship, and I'll explain what all those mean later in a moment. Graduation requirements is the 4 English, 4 math, 4 science, 4 social studies, and the state has specific sciences that you have to take, histories that you have to take, math and English. And then they have to get PE, fine arts, foreign language, perform on a certain number of inquiries and a certain number of independent studies. And this is all pretty straight cut because this is the bare minimum of what they would have to do. This is what you absolutely have to do to graduate high school from this school. And then component B is the admissions and enrollment policy. This is a lot of like paperwork type stuff. But the policy is basically that they have to apply between January 1st and March 1st. And then, so the admission, since it's a charter school, they can't be admitted based on qualification. So no test scores or anything like that. But there are 2 ways that you can do it. So you can do it a first come, first served, which is whoever signs up first gets a spot. If you have 100 openings in the 9th grade and you have 150 applicants, the first 100 would get their spots. Or you can do a lottery where you have 100 spots for 9th grade, you have 150 applicants, and you do a random drawing to figure out who are the 100 that get in. I chose to do first come, first served. Usually the lottery is more for schools where they have way more applicants than they have positions in the school, and it wouldn't be fair to do first come, first served because people would be creating mass lines out the door the day before, all that kind of stuff. So I decided to stick with that, the first come, first served for a smaller school, and then maybe later we would switch to a lottery if we had that problem arise. So they would submit the application, the school receives it, and they have to contact the applicant within 2 business days via the contact information that they provide. And then enrollment. Okay, so if they if we say you have gotten a space at this school, and they say yes, we would like to go to this school, they have to complete the enrollment agreement form within 5 business days in person at the school. So the way that a lot of schools, you do your hiring based on how many students you have. So like you would know, like I need this many teachers because I have this many students. And with public high schools, they don't really have this problem because most of the people in their area are going to go to that school. They don't have mass numbers leaving, and so they don't need this like insurement of enrollment. Like they don't have to ensure that the students are going to go to school there. And then private schools, they have this problem, but they can charge a fee or like a deposit for their enrollment. But since it's a charter school, I can't do either one of those things. So I had to come up with something else. And so I wanted to make sure that they had to come and sign this form within 5 business days. They have to come in person, and especially for 9th and 10th graders, likely their parent will have to drive them. And it just shows that they're serious about going to the school, that they apply, and then within 2 days they're going to get it back, and then they have to be back at the school in 5 days. Otherwise, it expires, they go to the bottom of the wait list. So then the next one is the enrollment agreement form. I typed this out. Congratulations, you've been granted a space. We're looking forward to see what you're going to do. In order to truly succeed, you need to understand these things, so please sign it. And so the first one is that they understand it's a privilege to go to school there. They're not entitled to their place at school. We don't have to keep them as a student at the school. It's not quite like a public high school where they don't really have a lot of options if behavior becomes a real problem. The second one is that they'll be held to a higher standard of respect and responsibility because of the freedoms that will be given to them in the afternoon, and that they should act accordingly. Number 3 is that they'll be encouraged to innovate and think creatively, and that they'll encourage their classmates to do the same. Number 4, that they'll be expected to complete original work, and that cheating and plagiarism are completely unacceptable. And then the 5th one is that the school is based upon innovation, independence, and self-discovery, and that they are aware of that, and that those are things that are important to them, and they're willing to develop those things throughout their time at the school. So then I also created the actual application just with Google Forms, just as like a sample of what kind of information I would need. They can't achieve qualification, so it all has to be just information gathering. So all this is just student information about their address, their phone numbers, email addresses, parents, siblings, and then that whole big paragraph at the bottom is like the admissions and enrollment policy. They have to say that, like, yes, I understand this is what's going to happen once I apply, that I have so many days to actually enroll. And then that they have to sign it and saying that it's true. So then component E, you'll notice that I skipped 2. One of them is, it just didn't quite happen. The admissions and enrollment policy turned out to be a much bigger project than 1 week long. So I actually spent 3 weeks on that one. And then the other component I'm saving till the end because it's my favorite one. So then component E is the organizational chart of responsibility and supplemental human resources forms. So the organizational chart, you'll notice that it has a triangle at the top of the CEO, superintendent, board of directors, and then the head of school. And these 3 have slightly different jobs as to managing the charter school, but they all 3 work together to make the big decisions and the overall mission of the school. And then you'll also notice that there are a lot of people reporting to the head of school and that they have a lot of responsibilities. And what I've learned at St. Philip's Academy is that this is very true. Miss Holton has all kinds of crazy responsibilities that fall under her jurisdiction just because they're in charge. And since it's such a small school that you wouldn't necessarily have assistant principals at this point. just because there's only 450 students, and so the head of school can handle a lot of those responsibilities that would normally be handed out to other assistant principals. And then additionally, I have all the supplemental human resources forms, and those just describe the basic job duties, salary range, compensation, everything. And so I had to do that for each one of the jobs that were on my organizational chart, as the Generation 20 open enrollment charter application requires. But I'm not going to show you all those because they're not very exciting. And then, okay, so this is the CEO. I'm going to kind of talk about the separation between the CEO and the head of school. The CEO is in charge of a lot of oversight and management, and like business development and the finances and gaining funds for the school. And then the head of school is more in charge of the like day-to-day operations, the discipline, the curriculum, the admissions and enrollment policy, all that kind of thing. And then also I'm requiring the Gifted and Talented supplemental certification for my teachers, my head of school, the CEO and superintendent, and then the counselor as well. Because that is a lot more education based on specifically what are the needs of gifted and talented students. So this is the head of school as well. They're in charge of personnel management, discipline, scheduling, crisis management, student assessment, all those kinds of things. More of the day-to-day of the school. And then component F is the head of school job descriptions and qualifications. This is kind of more an expanded version of the human resources form, but it's very much the same thing. The head of school is the educational leader of the school. They're in charge of making sure it aligns with its mission, and they're in charge of communicating the vision and mission of the school with parents, staff, and the surrounding community in coordination with the CEO. And then component G, this is the description of facility, basically how many classrooms, a gym, cafeteria, all that kind of stuff. So based on the number of students I have, I'll need 16 regular classrooms, 4 science classrooms with storage for all kinds of chemicals and science materials. A media room or auditorium large enough to seat all the students and staff. You need to have a place where you can address the whole school at one time. Office spaces for the nurse, counselor, head of school, office manager, and CEO if the CEO so desires to have an office at the school. Most of the time, they'll be running around doing fundraising and walking, or like traveling and giving talks and like advertising for the school. They also need a gymnasium, cafeteria, lobby, and desk for the secretary. Outdoor common areas. In those afternoons where they're going to be doing the independent study, I wanted them to be able to be inside or outside depending on what they're learning about and what the environment that they learn best in. If it's a beautiful day, I think they should be able to go outside. And then parking for students and staff. Since it's a high school, there's a lot more parking required than would be from an elementary and middle school because some of the students will be driving. And then restrooms for the staff. And then the state of Texas has certain rules about how many square feet per student you're required to have for a school. So this is between 750 and 90,000 square feet total. And then component H is the yearly budget. So the expense are mostly salaries with facilities and programming, but it's a lot of salaries. And these salaries are pretty similar to what would be in a public school salary. It gets tricky depending on the fundraising you get. This is just like a sample, but it just depends on how many grants and fundraisers you actually receive, and then you would determine your salaries based on that. And then the funds, most of it comes from, or about 2/3 of it comes from the state, with $5,532 per student per year, assuming 80% attendance. So I would receive that lovely figure from the state just based on attendance alone. And then the rest is from grants and fundraising that would mostly be the CEO's job to make sure that we are running smoothly and that they're getting the grants and fundraising that we need. And then the last one, my favorite, which is not complete yet, component B, which is the course summary for inquiries, individual exploration, and independent study and mentorship. So the inquiries are questions. I haven't quite decided on how many they'll be required. I have the class split up into 9 weeks instead of 6 weeks, so they have a little bit more time. It's a little bit more relaxed when it's 9 weeks. there's not so much of a rush to get grades in and to get things completed. So